Smiling in court. That is a former South Carolina kindergarten teacher and theater director who's accused of grooming and sexually abusing a boy for years, starting when he was just 14 years old. This video per WYFF. When the boy's mom faced her in court, she called her unhinged.
Looking back, it sickens me knowing Nikki manipulated our son and our family. She was waiting on this opportunity and she found the perfect victim and family to prey on.
That video per Upstate News Today, and the victim in this story is not hiding what he told cameras after his alleged abuser appeared in court. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Before we get started, I do have an exciting announcement to make for all of you who like to watch police body camera videos. We know you love the action, but this is even better. Highlights from On Patrol Live is on YouTube. The show is live on the Reels channel and Reels Plus app every Friday and Saturday, and follows police officers across the country with over 50 cameras rolling live. And let me tell you, it is wild. We're talking high-speed chases, intense standoffs, and everything in between. So head on over to On Patrol Live's YouTube channel to catch it all. And make sure to subscribe. The channel is now live. It launched this week. First day was yesterday. You can subscribe by clicking the link in the description. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. All right, let's get to this story, a disturbing story of an alleged breach of trust that we are following out of South Carolina. A teacher, a former teacher now, who is accused of not just abusing a young underage boy, but grooming him for years. This is the former teacher who we're talking about. Nicole Callaham is her name. People, including the victim in this story, though, they knew her as Nikki. She was a married mom, and we have learned during her court hearing, she's currently pregnant. That was a shocking development in this story. I'll get more into that in just a moment. What we know about Callaham is that she worked as a public school kindergarten teacher. Here's video of her dancing in a classroom for a local talent show. This is still posted publicly on YouTube. Now, Nikki also used to be the musical theater director for a local playhouse in town. On Facebook, that playhouse describes itself as a place that, quote, produces multiple theatrical productions each school year, fostering confidence and creativity. According to the victim's family in this story, it is at that playhouse in 2021 where the abuse began. The family, who you'll hear from in just a moment, they spoke in court, said their then 14-year-old son auditioned for a role in a musical production of Legally Blonde. The victim's mom said that Nikki gave her son the part. Here's the flyer for the show back in 2021. This is still up on the Playhouse's Facebook page. And Nikki seemed to be the type of person that people in Anderson, South Carolina really trust, because she was a mom, she was a kindergarten teacher. On top of that, she was the head of this musical production that was supposed to inspire confidence in young people. We found this Facebook post after a Legally Blonde performance in 2021 where another mom, unconnected to this case, but you can see she posts on social media that Nikki, quote, inspires her after seeing the show. But it was here that authorities say the sexual abuse began. The victim's mom says that Nikki not only was running the rehearsal, but then she offered to give the young boy a ride to and from rehearsals, which the mom admitted at the time it was just seen as a nice thing to do and a big help because she had other kids with demanding schedules. The mom also says that Nikki had a daughter of her own, so it seemed like she was good at taking care of kids. Her daughter was a toddler, but then Nikki started to open up about her personal life and needing help. Nicole Callaham's 33 years old. Her attorney in court said that she went to the University of South Carolina. And again, we laid out for you on the surface how from being a teacher to a mom, it appeared that she was the type of person that a lot of people would trust. But we wanted to know whether she had been accused of anything like this in the past. So I put her name into truthfinder.com to see if there was any sort of criminal history, and nothing really came up. Here at Law&Crime, we partner with Truthfinder, and we use it to get details on the people who are involved in our stories. But even if you don't work in true crime, this can be an excellent resource to give you some peace of mind. It is one of the largest public search services in the United States. And with the paid subscription service, you can get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone. Right now, you can get 50% off your first month of confidential background reports. Just go to www.truthfinder.com/OTC. All right, let's get back to the story. Nikki told the family that she was having marriage trouble, that also she was having issues with her relationship with her mom and her sister. So this family saw her as someone who not only was helping them, but she was in need of help. That mom now, though, spoke in court. Again, you'll hear from her in just a moment. And she said beneath the surface, allegedly at this point, Nikki was sexually abusing the boy, and police used the term grooming to describe the allegations that Nicole Callaham is now facing. Eventually, that mom says that Nikki was found to be inappropriate with her son. And that is when she told Nikki to back off and to stop contacting her family. But Nikki allegedly did not. She said that Nikki changed her social media profiles to have different handles so she could still covertly communicate with the boy. Nikki even bought an Xbox, the mom says, so she could talk to her son while he played video games. What is even more sick and twisted was that the boy's mom said in court that Nikki's toddler daughter was allegedly there during sexual encounters between Nikki and that underage boy.
All right, state your name for me, ma'am.
Nicole Callaham.
Here's video of Callaham last week during her bond hearing in Anderson County, South Carolina, per Upstate News Today. It streamed it live on Facebook. Nikki is facing 3 counts of criminal sexual conduct with a minor and a charge of contributing to the delinquency of a minor. She's also facing charges in Greenville, South Carolina, for 8 counts of criminal sexual conduct with a minor and 4 counts of unlawful conduct towards a child. In court in Anderson County, the victim's mom made a statement as Callaham watched on video from jail per Upstate News Today.
I am learning that her daughter was present during some of the abusive incidents, which is another level of sick, demented behavior Nikki exhibited and somehow kept hidden from us. But in a text conversation about me not being able to be fake, Nikki texted me she is a good actress and those skills come in handy. So those are our answers to how she led a double life, masked as a mentor of young, impressionable children, kindergarten teacher and mother of a little girl, just trying to get through an unfair season of her life to in reality being sick, twisted, calculating sex offender.
Then a moment that we don't often see in these kinds of cases. The victim in this story is now 18 years old, and after court, he faced the cameras and talked about this case. This video per WYFF TV.
I'm here to fight, and I'm not going to back down. And that I think more awareness needs to be brought to things like this, and just because I'm a man doesn't mean that it should be shunned away. Because I was a child, I wasn't a man, I was a boy.
Callaham resigned as a teacher in May of this year, and not only is she facing those charges in Greenville, South Carolina, related to this case, as well as Anderson County, South Carolina. Police say there's an ongoing investigation in Clemson, South Carolina, which is nearby, related to alleged abuse. In court, Callaham's defense attorney argued, though, that she is innocent. He argued that she should be granted bail, partly because she's currently pregnant. This was Callaham in court today in Greenville per WYFF. She was granted $120,000 bail in that case. Her attorney argued that she should be granted bail because she is between 8 and 9 months pregnant. Here's what he said in her first court appearance last week in Anderson County, where she was granted a $40,000 bail.
She's pregnant now. She's pregnant now and due in January, February of 2026. She's got a master's from USC. She's got a bachelor's from Anderson University. She's been raised in Anderson County. Her grandparents, her parents, grandparents, all her family live here in Anderson County. She has no criminal history, no violent behavior. She's been in the theater for decades.
Her lawyer said that she pleads not guilty to all the charges. She has provided a statement to law enforcement. She has cooperated, and he says there is more to this story, so we will just have to wait and see. Joining us now to help us unpack, and there is a lot to unpack in this case, is former sex crimes prosecutor Dan Shore. Thank you for taking the time, as always, to be with us here on Law and Crime. I want to start with the victim, who is now 18 years old. But allegedly this abuse began when he was 14. He, after the court hearing, speaks to the media. And what do you make of that moment? What does it mean for this case going forward?
Well, his words were very powerful. He talked about the general nature of the abuse that he experienced, but he also, when he spoke, in the statement that you just alluded to, he talked about how sometimes when men are the victims in these types of cases, it's not taken as seriously. And he thought one reason he should speak is so he could let the world know that this has had a profound negative impact on his life. Even though he is male, society has come a long way, but there's definitely an attitude that teenage boys are more likely to be fine with this type of sexual behavior, and that if it's a girl, she's more of a victim. But it's really important to see that someone who is as young as 14 when this allegedly started with an adult teacher, even though he's male and she's female, that can lead to traumatic problems throughout their lives. And it is sex abuse, and society's come a long way to recognizing that. But he wanted to address that. And I thought that was a powerful point that he made.
Yeah, the quote that stood out to me is he says, "I wasn't a man, I was a boy,"
Mhm.
when all of this happened. Let's start at the beginning of when this, with Nicole Callaham, she allegedly first makes contact with this victim. It was a kind of a community theater program she ran in 2021. And this victim is going for an audition, really wants to be in theater, gets the big part. And then it seems that she just allegedly started from there. What do you make of just the timeline that was laid out by the victim's mom in court?
Well, it's consistent with other cases I've prosecuted and investigated, where usually there's a pattern of grooming, ingratiating oneself into the lives of the student, but also their family so that they're trusted. And that's part of the process. You rarely see sex abuse by teachers where it just comes out of nowhere. Usually there's establishing trust, then boundary blurring behavior. And also, often when people experience sex abuse in the real world as opposed to in the media, it's from someone they trust. In the media, it's often from a stranger danger, those types of things. But in the real world, when I've investigated cases, most often it's from someone who's in a position of trust and is in a position to abuse that trust. So a trusted teacher, a trusted coach, trusted family member. And these are all tragic situations, but part of the grooming process is to establish that trust and then to take it the next step, which then leads to sex abuse.
And the term grooming is used a lot, in a lot of different ways, but it seems to be more commonplace for that term to be thrown out there. And police in their news release said that she is accused of grooming this victim. From the standpoint of these cases of sex abuse, what is the definition of grooming?
The way I look at it is it's preliminary behavior that ingratiates yourself to somebody else in a way that an objective third person would not necessarily see any problem with. So if you are observing this teacher with this student who's 14 at the beginning of their interactions, and you just see a teacher helping the student with what they want to pursue academically or in theater and being nice to them and being supportive, an objective third party would look at it and say, oh, that's fine. That's really nice. That's a teacher doing what a teacher is supposed to do. So to me, grooming is pushing those boundaries to get someone to trust you to be in your life in an intimate way, but not necessarily a sexually intimate way. And then that lays the groundwork to be able to push those boundaries in private in ways that do go beyond what is allowed by the law, and that does constitute sex abuse. And again, a teacher generally is not just going to go up to an underage student and just start making sexual advances on them. We don't see that in the cases we look at. But what we do see is this period of making them feel comfortable, making them feel trusted, making the parents feel, oh, it's okay if my younger student is alone with this older teacher because I know that teacher. I trust that teacher. I've seen that teacher be supportive, so I'm comfortable as a parent. And then that trust is often abused.
Yeah, and in this case, is this, and it kind of goes to your last point, because I think of, there's probably a lot of people who brought their kids to this, this playhouse, and we don't know if there are other victims. It hasn't been said. It appears that there's just one as far as this case is concerned. But with many of these predators that you see, I mean, when does, I guess in their mind, the fact that they're going to act on whatever they have happened? I mean, is it that, you bring your kid to this audition and there's the predator like waiting to attack, or how does it just get to this point where then she's at, and in the case where she's buying an Xbox, according to the mom, to still communicate with them after she's told to stop?
Right. And we've seen that in other cases where people are told, okay, you can't text this teacher anymore. And they switch to Instagram direct message, or they switch to Snapchat because the messages disappear. So we've seen that in a lot of cases where a parent says, okay, I've seen some of these messages. I'm uncomfortable with what's happening. No more communication with this teacher. But a teenager can find a way to communicate with a teacher if they're both willing to find some other method. So it's really tough as a parent. You want to monitor who your child's interacting with, but there's also an instinct as a parent to trust teachers. Teachers are generally seen in society as people who are trustworthy. They're in positions of trust, and we want to trust them. You can't, especially when someone is 14, 15, 16, it's impossible to monitor everything they do, everyone they communicate with. So I think what a parent can do is try to set a climate where telling your child, if you're uncomfortable with any interactions with anyone, feel free to come to me. You'll never get in trouble if you just tell me that something is happening that is problematic to you. Because a lot of students in this situation may engage in some type of sexual activity with a teacher, and then it becomes upsetting to them, but they don't want to tell their parents because they're afraid their parents are going to get mad that they took those first steps with a teacher. And who wants to talk to their parents about any sexual activity when you're a teenager? Telling students, I will not, your child who's a student, I will not be angry with you if you come to me in good faith to just disclose a problem you're having, even if it involves sexual activity. It's easier said than done.
It certainly is. Looking at the pattern that Nicole Callaham apparently laid out with this victim, but also this victim's family, because the mom talked in court about how they struck up this friendship, and then Nikki starts talking about the challenges she's having in her marriage. She's apparently having difficulties with her mom and her sister, and it almost, she built herself up to be this sympathetic figure to this mom. And that appears to be a moment, if all of this is true, where kind of the gate of trust opens up. How common do you see that play out with these predators?
It's unfortunately, it's very common where people gain the trust of a parent or both parents. And again, it's not just with teachers. We see that with coaches. We see that with religious figures in all religions. We see that all the time. Relatives, uncles. Unfortunately, it's part of the tragedy of sex abuse that the people who are committing sex abuse very often are in those positions of trust, and they know how to gain that trust. If you have a teenage boy who's 14, 15, and you have a teacher who seems very interested in their education, in their progress, and what they're interested in, and they seem sympathetic and they seem like a well-adjusted person, the instinct on a parent by a parent is to trust that person, because you don't want to go through life being skeptical of everyone that tries to help your child, right? You want to trust some people. So some people are going to violate that trust, and a background check isn't always going to find that someone might be a predator, because if they've never had a criminal record or civil litigation or never posted anything problematic on social media or never had a problem at a job before, it's not going to come up during a background check. So I think you really need, as a parent, to talk to your child and reinforce with them, if anything is happening that's blurring boundaries, making you uncomfortable, please let me know. You can talk to me about it. I won't be mad at you. And a lot of students just don't want to go to their parents about these situations, and then they get worse and worse.
Yeah, it's really hard, because I also think, as a parent, and also thinking back to when I was in school, I mean, you spend so much time with these teachers, and also so many of us have had teachers in our lives who are like great mentors, and they're people who you enjoyed not just, learning from, but you do strike up somewhat of a friendship, whether it's like talking about sports or whatever. If they're a coach, they're a huge, maybe a father figure in your life. And so you want to trust those people. As parents now, though, and we see so many of these stories, I mean, I feel like, Dan, we talk like once a month at least with cases like this that come up. And, for anybody who watches Law and Crime, I mean, we'll have multiple of these a week.
Mm-hmm.
How are we supposed to have those relationships with teachers, and kids have those relationships with teachers, but then also be able to seek out and find the alleged Nicole Callahams of the world who have these terrible, allegedly, ulterior motives?
Well, I think you have to draw lines of what's appropriate activity and what's not. That is not just about sexual activity. So there shouldn't really be communication between a teacher and a student in a social way over text message or instant messenger, direct message over Instagram or anything like that. There's no need for a teacher to be messaging with a student other than about school activity. And if it's about school activity, it should be over a school platform. It shouldn't be over their personal social media or text messaging. So I think drawing that clear line is really important. And also, just when students really shouldn't be with a teacher for extended period of time by themselves without another person present, without other students present, without another teacher present. And I think enforcing those guidelines and having a school have a culture that if people see those guidelines being violated, then hopefully a lot of these things will be reported earlier. But those are two things that I think really are bright line rules that if they're enforced more by parents and schools would stop a lot of this problematic activity.
Do you also see that for parents to have that line as well? Because I mean, in this case, it seemed like a key part of what played out was Nicole Callaham kind of confiding in the mom and their best friends, and then suddenly, she's taking this, alleged victim to and from rehearsal, and it just seemed to open the door for a lot of the abuse that apparently happened.
It's really challenging. I know as a parent, one of the challenges of parenting is getting your kids to things and from things, right? Like you're driving them here,
Yeah.
driving them there. And if you have a teacher who seems very supportive, who says, "Oh, I can drive them here, I can take your child home," that is extremely helpful for parents. I understand why a parent would say, "Okay, here's a woman. She seems like a really caring teacher. She's in her early 30s. She seems supportive. There's no reason to suspect misconduct." And I do think people are less likely to be suspicious if it involves a boy who's in the situation. I think it would be if there was a girl who was 14 and you had a male teacher in their 30s
Right.
driving them, most parents would say like, "No way in hell am I letting this 30-year-old teacher drive my 14-year-old daughter." But I think there is an instinct on the part of parents when it's a 14-year-old boy and a 30-something-year-old female teacher to say, "All right, I'm more trusting here. I'm less concerned that she's going to attack him," things like that. So a lot of one reason we have a lot of cases like this is because parents don't have their radar up of concern the way they would with an underage girl, with an older male teacher. But I think it's important as a parent to really monitor, check in with the student, their child, about what's happening, what type of interactions there are. And as I said before, most teenagers do not want to talk to their parents about anything related to sex. They don't want to say, "Oh, the teacher kissed me or did something like this." So most of them are going to keep it to themselves. There's going to be shame. There's going to be misplaced self-blame about what they're doing. And that makes it feed on itself, because once someone feels isolated, a lot of times that's when sex abuse is taken to the next level, when the victim feels isolated, feels like they can't talk to anyone about it. And then it goes on and gets worse, unfortunately.
And in the case of Nicole Callaham, she's facing charges in Anderson County, South Carolina, but also in Greenville, South Carolina. And then potentially there's charges in another jurisdiction that could be coming. In these cases, and to our understanding right now, there's just this one victim. But how does the legal system look at if there is an alleged sex act that took place in one county and another county, and then you have crimes in different counties? How does the legal system handle all that?
Right, and this does happen pretty often with all sorts of crimes. So each county has their own jurisdiction to prosecute the offender. Sometimes they work together to have all the allegations dealt with in one county, but very often different counties will prosecute separately. And then ultimately, if there are convictions in multiple counties, there's the question of, will those sentences run, if there is an incarceratory sentence, will it be consecutive where each sentence runs one after another, or are they concurrent where all the sentences run together and that's a much shorter sentence? Ultimately, the judges at sentencing, and we're a long way from all of this
Yeah.
being determined, but that's what happens when there's multiple jurisdictions. Hopefully law enforcement in different jurisdictions can work together, share evidence. You don't want the same victim and witnesses being interviewed over and over. That could be re-traumatizing. So hopefully they can work together to limit the number of interviews and things like that.
And then just lastly, she is pregnant. We didn't know that until her defense attorney said it during this bond hearing in Anderson County. When you have a defendant who, I don't know how far along she is, but presumably she's going to give birth while while it's ongoing. I mean, does that have any impact on how this could play out?
Well, it's heartbreaking, not only for her to be pregnant and expecting a new child while this is going on, but also for that unborn child who will be born with a mother who's facing these charges, maybe incarcerated. So that could be seen as a mitigating factor at sentencing. It doesn't take away from what they allegedly did, but when sentencing is being considered, some judges may see that as a mitigating factor because and this is something we deal with a lot in a lot of cases where people are sent to prison and they may be parents of young children and that affects their lives. But at the same time, you don't want being a parent to excuse someone from being incarcerated, because then people who don't have children are going to be going to prison longer than people who have children. And that doesn't seem fair either. So it's a really difficult, challenging situation. It's one of many factors that judges look at in sentencing.
Yeah, and we'll see how this case plays out. Dan, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. I know you have a book that's coming out just a couple of weeks from now. What do people need to know about it?
Sure. So the book is called Open Bar. It's a novel, and it's available for pre-order on Amazon, everywhere else. It's a novel about sexual misconduct at schools based on my real-world experience. And people can go to Substack and search for me, Dan Shore, there. I have a newsletter which gives more information about these types of issues.
Yeah, and such important issues to talk about. Dan Shore, former sex crimes prosecutor. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for joining us.
You too. Thanks for having me.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.